Every time I get to the end of Cyberpunk 2077 and I complete a playthrough, it feels as if I've lost something or someone important to me. And this is not an unfamiliar feeling. I experienced this with The Witcher 3, I experienced this with the Mass Effect franchise, and even BG3. I am a serial replayer. I have a habit of getting to about, say, 5 to 10 hours into a game and getting really comfortable with the mechanics and the flow and the gameplay, and then actually completely discarding that playthrough and moving to a new playthrough. And I tend to do this repetitively throughout my time with the game. And after a certain point of self-reflection, I've realized that I do this because I do not want the game to end. My experience with Cyberpunk 2077 was a little bit different. I was hyped up for many years, anticipating the game's release, and then when it finally released, it wasn't what I expected it to be. Now, I'm not someone who typically gets drawn into popular opinion without first having my own opinion. In fact, there are many games that people dislike that I actually like quite a bit. For example, Dragon Age The Veilguard. Yes, as a Dragon Age game, I don't love it, but as its own standalone game, I actually think it has quite a bit to offer. So when I saw the reviews for Cyberpunk and I read the articles and read people's comments about how upset they were about the game, I did not allow that to influence me. When I went into the game, I went in with extremely high expectations, I think like a lot of people. Not only was it my most anticipated game ever, but I had high expectations because of how good The Witcher 3 was and how pro-consumer CD Projekt Red had conducted themselves. When I started the playthrough of the game, I was playing on a pretty mid-tier PC. I specifically did not want to play it on console because I wanted to buy the game from GOG, because I wanted CD Projekt Red to have every single cent of my money and none of it to go to another publisher like, say, Sony, or another storefront like even Steam. I didn't experience very many bugs, unlike many people that I saw. However, the world felt very empty and sort of desolate, but not desolate in the way that you would expect something from the cyberpunk world to be. It just felt gray and lifeless, and I really didn't care anything about V. I hated that it was first person, I hated the clothes, I didn't think the gunplay was that great, driving vehicles sucked, and frankly, I really didn't give a shit about any of the characters. Much later on, I picked up the game and gave it a fresh playthrough, and since that playthrough, I have consistently played this game, even after completing it, at least once a month. Cyberpunk is my downtime game. If there's something that I'm waiting for, if there's a game that I'm waiting for the release for, Cyberpunk is the game that I'm playing in the interim. Over the years, it's been completely transformed, not only as a game, but a work of art. And when I say art, I'm not being facetious or dramatic. I mean, genuinely, this is a majorly artistic endeavor. And I say that because the way that this game is able to play on your emotions and connect with you and make you deeply care about not only the characters, but the world and the consequences of these actions throughout that world, it's just incredible. Every time I play this game, I imagine, wow, what if you had a terminal illness and this is the game that you choose to play? How does it resonate with someone going through that kind of struggle? Because that is what is happening to V. Her brain is literally being overwritten by an engram, and the engram is not even a living person. It's a copy of a person. So even though as much we love Johnny Silverhand, or at least hopefully by the end you've been able to connect with him and kind of get over some of his douchebaggery, even though he seems so lifelike, he is not the real Johnny Silverhand. Johnny Silverhand died years ago, years before anything in this game happened. And by the time that you encounter his copy, he's basically become, I mean, yes, he is a legend, but also he's a terrorist. He basically dresses up his narcissism as a labor of love, an act of love. He wants to get revenge for Alt, but ultimately it's about his ego. And actually, if you read the short story Never Fade Away, which is in the original Cyberpunk rulebook, Johnny is directly responsible for Alt's death. She was actually devising her own escape plan when he came bumbling in and completely screwed up the entire plan. Even as you're watching his memories of the previous events at Arasaka Tower, you can't fully trust him because he's a completely unreliable narrator, and as everyone knows, memories sometimes are false or conflated, or you're going to remember something differently than someone else does. And for Johnny Silverhand, he is the captain of the ship. He is the protagonist. He is the hero. He is the guy that's putting it up the ass of the corporations. But despite all that bravado, he is actually teaming up with Militech to take down Arasaka, or, take down is kind of, that's a very ambitious statement. He is wounding Arasaka. And he does that with the help of Militech. And he is actually just, if you're looking at this canonically, he's just kind of a side character within that operation. He is not the main driver. He is not the main force. He is one of many. So when you imagine this person, this personality, I should say, a copy of that kind of personality, eating away at your brain and slowly taking you over, and suddenly V is noticing that her mannerisms are changing. She's wanting to smoke. She has opinions on things that don't necessarily feel like hers. And there's no cure for this. You can't just yank it out of your skull and move on. There's no overwrite button or factory reset. So for V, this looks like a death sentence unless she can find some way to stop the progress. Now, your ending is going to depend on the choices that you make throughout the game. I personally do not have the heart to have a bad ending, so I was fortunate enough on my first playthrough of Cyberpunk that I went with the Nomad ending, and for me that turned out really well. So now, every time that I play this game, I always choose the Nomad ending, even though, I feel kind of bad about what happens to Saul. Ultimately, I think it's the closest thing to a happy ending you'll get, but ultimately, it's not even a happy ending. It's very ambiguous. Yes, you're riding off into the sunset with your best friend Pan Am, and there's the hope of a cure, or I should say a fix, but there's no certainty of that coming to pass. And that concept in and of itself is terrifying. That's why I liken it to a terminal illness like, say, cancer or any myriad of other illnesses. Even though there's a bit of a reprieve, a remission, there's a possibility that she's just going to fade away. She's going to die. Now, death is not something that V is unaccustomed to. The entire premise of this game is that V is a mercenary whose job is literally to kill people. You spend the majority of the game just absolutely annihilating roomfuls of people. There are very interesting points in conversation with Johnny where V points out, oh, you're a terrorist, you're a terrible person, you're a murderer, and he rebuts that V's hands aren't exactly bloodless. And this is a very interesting concept. The way that you choose to play this game is up to you. but you are not going to walk out of any situation within the game without some kind of violence. For me personally, I tend to be very vengeful in this game. When you come across the Voodoo Boys, not only do they betray you, but they also have impacted Evelyn. And you could argue that Evelyn asked for it or got what she deserves, or any number of opinions. However, what Evelyn experiences as a consequence of her actions is much too severe. She did not deserve the things that happened to her. Evelyn is literally incapacitated by the cyber attack to the point where she is non-responsive, and Woodman, the owner of Clouds, which is the doll club that Evelyn works at, he takes advantage of that situation and he sexually assaults her, and then when he's finished with her, he moves her along to a back alley ripper doc by the name of Fingers. With a name like that, you can only expect bad things, and he sees if it's possible to fix her, realizes that it is not possible, and then essentially says, here you go, do with her what you will. When you meet Fingers, you see very quickly what he is about morally, as he so bluntly and snakily tells V, even though his clientele don't have money, they always have a way to pay. And that is very disturbing. This is someone that is taking advantage of people that are extremely vulnerable. They do not have a choice. So they either give up their dignity, they give up their body in exchange for parts that really aren't that fantastic to begin with. Most of them are broken or damaged in some way, but it's enough that their quality of life is not entirely hugely impacted. So this is the person that Evelyn is given to. So Fingers has his way, and then he ends up selling her to some scabs who in turn take advantage of her. So by the time that V and Judy are able to rescue Evelyn, she is mentally and physically destroyed. And even though physically she could recover, mentally she is completely done for. She is no longer able to find her way out of the darkness, and she kills herself. And that not only affects Evelyn, but it affects Judy, and through Judy, it sets off a sequence of actions that lead to more misery. So by the time that I find the Voodoo Boys, not only am I extremely pissed off that they betrayed me, but I am gunning for their blood because of what they did to Evelyn. And that's how I play the entire game as V. Even with Pan Am, when she goes to retrieve her Thornton and from there goes to kill the person that betrayed her, instead of telling her, oh no, violence is bad, you shouldn't hurt people, you're not going to be happy at the end of it, I instead encourage her to take revenge because that's what my V would do. So it is very interesting to watch a conversation between V and Johnny where V is outraged and Johnny just doesn't particularly care because to him in that moment, V is a hypocrite. Now that particular example is just one of the complexities in the game. This is a game that is massive. Not only can you do main quests, you can do side quests, you do gigs, you do jobs. Every single thing that you do within this game ties into something else. Whether or not there's dialogue for it, you may be finding text messages or emails or voice recordings or any number of things that are going to fill out a story. Even coming across just a random point of interest on the map, you're going to find a gun that has an AI built in that sets itself to either a puppy-loving pacifist or a stone-cold killer, depending on which body parts you want to target when shooting enemies. So are you aiming for the head, or are you aiming for the extremities? Shoot to kill or shoot to maim? And eventually, if you pick the Stone Cold Killer option, you will kill too many people with this gun, and the gun will call you a psychopath and shut down and refuse to shoot until you return it to its previous owner, which in turn triggers yet another quest. It seems like in Night City, every disagreement is solved with a gun. There's a futility that permeates the world, not just for V, but for everyone in the world. And yet, despite that futility, V keeps fighting. She keeps looking for a cure. She keeps looking for a way to make the lives of not only herself, but the people around her better. And I mean, that's kind of the point of the game. I don't think anybody wants to play a game and actually be the villain, because nobody views themselves as a villain. You know, it can be fun to do things that are kind of fucked up in video games, but those are not things that we would do in real life. And if the game is done well, if you do those kinds of things in-game consistently, it doesn't feel great, and there are consequences to those actions. I'm the type of player, personally, that likes to do a quick save, do something messed up, and then immediately reload right before I did the messed up thing, because I'm curious about what will happen and what the limitations are, but I don't actually want that to be my playthrough. V's resilience through this entire game is kind of inspiring. If you start out as a street kid, you are basically coming back from, I believe it's Atlanta, and you failed. You left Night City for Atlanta, and whatever you were looking for in Atlanta you didn't find, so you're back in Night City, and you're trying to pull up old connections and basically revamp and restart your reputation within Night City. And one of the first things that you do is you're trying to help a friend, so you deal with somebody that's kind of shady, well, very shady, and you know they're shady, and you know they're a piece of shit, but you want to cover the debt of a friend who cannot cover their debt, so you agree to steal a car, and you fail at that. Through that failure, you do meet Jackie, and that's fortunate, but up until that point, it doesn't look like a lot has been going well for V. And then with the heist and Jackie passing away and everything that cascades from those events, V is just constantly fighting for air. But that being said, the thing about V is that she does keep fighting, no matter what, no matter how overwhelming the odds, no matter how unlikely the situation, all she sees is forward. And as much as V starts taking on parts of Johnny's personality, you have to wonder if Johnny starts taking things from V. I mean, he could have always kind of been a good guy deep down, but, you know, that's not really something that we see from him. He's very selfish, and yet the way that he cares for V, even towards the end, is not selfish. He makes it clear multiple times that he is disgusted by what the engram is doing to V, and he wants no part of it, but like V, he doesn't have any choice. However, he does actively try to help her and give her advice, even though most of the time the advice is unsolicited. But he also shows care for her and concern when the engram starts reaching the later stages of the takeover. Moments where she becomes incapacitated, he takes over and gets her to safety, even taking her to a hotel where once he laid and stared at the ceiling for weeks because he was so deeply depressed and suffering from PTSD for notions and ideals that were no longer his, for things that he didn't believe in any longer. And when he tells V about this, this is one of the first times that you see Johnny being soft and kind and caring, and you realize that deep down, somewhere in there is someone who is honorable. And not just honorable, but thoughtful and kind. On my most recent playthrough of Cyberpunk, I got to the end of Phantom Liberty, and I couldn't play the game any further because I was so sad about how that ended. Now, I tend to side with Songbird, and get the quotation secret ending, which is not really so secret any longer. And part of me always kind of feels like a sucker for that, because even from the very beginning, Songbird is manipulating you and lying to you. However, her character is so compelling and so touching that you can't help but side with her. She is experiencing a struggle very akin to V, and saving Songbird is almost like V saving herself. I am actually deeply devastated that you are not able to meet Songbird if you get the ending with Arasaka, because that ending finds you on the moon, which is where Songbird is, and, you know, there's no way in hell that you guys would end up in the same place and not meet each other. Little bit of an oversight on that, and which obviously the DLC was released after the game, but I'm like, come on guys, CD Projekt Red, can you please just a little thread, just a little tiny bit of a thread, just a little one. The relationship with Songbird isn't the only amazing relationship either. You have Judy, you have Panam, you've got River, Rogue, Takamura, any number of characters. And each one is incredibly unique and filled out and feels like living people. Even the bad guys are deeply likable if you take a moment to speak with them, and it's hard not to side with them, honestly. All of these stories combine and they create this beautiful, beautiful, multifaceted story, and when it comes to the end, it just sucks that it's over. When I roll credits on this game, I watch through the full sequence. I set down my controller and I just think about the game. I think about V and all the calls that come in, checking in with her, or, you know, depending on what you do with Takamura, maybe possibly calling you names. Reaching the end of it feels like an achievement, but it also feels like something really amazing is over, and you're not going to get it back the exact same way ever again. You're never going to have that first playthrough that really hit for you, or even the second or the third. At this point, when I play Cyberpunk, I know it back and forth. I know every single nook and cranny of this game because I've played it so much, and nothing really surprises me anymore. There's a sort of comfort to that kind of familiarity, but also there's a little bit of sadness because it feels like there's not quite anything left for me to discover. So now I just have to wait the next 10 years for Cyberpunk 2 to come out and hope that it launches in a much better state than the last one. It's a game that I deeply love. It's on the top of my franchises. It's Cyberpunk, Mass Effect, and The Witcher. That is the holy trinity of gaming for me, and it doesn't get much better than that. With that being said, that's where our time together ends for the day. So don't forget to toss a coin to your Witcher on the way to the bar, and have a great day wherever you are.
Ooh, I love this song.
Never knowing which way's up, down. It's never what it seems when it's all I'm ever missing. I'm waiting. And I don't need no head in my hands to know I'm ever heading way south.
Don't do this often, I'm guessing.
This meaning
Doing shit, just cuz. No forethought. Carefree relaxing.
Everything about it